Hi, everybody. So here we're going to learn about Nevitt Sanford's theory of challenge and support. This will just be a quick little intro about it, and it should allow you to then complete the journal. So Sanford developed this theory, right? He was really the first one to start looking at college student development. There had been a lot of research on student development, but he did it specifically for college students. And he started doing it in 1962, and then he kind of really tweaked this theory and finalized it in 1966. So there's a quote up there, right, about several conditions, found or not found, in the college environment can have a major impact on students' growth and development. And then it lists a few, and I highlighted challenge and support. I mean, we've talked about involvement in the past with, Alexander Aston's theory of involvement. There's also marginality and mattering, feeling like you have a sense of belonging and validation. And so those are separate. If you're curious about those, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to focus on Sanford's theory here. So Sanford's theory had three developmental conditions to it, and the first of which is readiness. Right, so he defines readiness as being the result, I guess, as how ready you are for the environment that you're going to get into. But someone's readiness results either because of the internal processes associated with maturation or beneficial environmental factors, right? So, if you're growing up and you're in a beneficial environment to progress and to develop, then that's gonna affect your readiness. Or, some people just kind of have those internal processes that make them mature quicker than others. They grow up. And so if we look, and we have an example of, let's say, Calculus 1 and how ready someone might be to do that. Somebody who's taken Calc 1 might be very ready to do it. They've had pre-calculus, they have a great understanding of trigonometry, they have a great understanding of algebra, and so they're fairly ready to do that. Or the other side, right, they don't have that strong base in trigonometry, they make a lot of mistakes with their algebra, they might not be ready to do that. And so that's just an academic example. We'll look at some other examples in a moment, but the other developmental conditions are challenge, right, and then support. And so if you look at that calculus example, calculus can be a huge challenge, right? There's a lot of problem sets. It's a difficult concept, but it's even more challenging for somebody who's not quite ready. And then there's support, right? So do you have a lot of support? Is somebody helping you? Is the teacher helping you? Are the homeworks really good for you and preparing for you for the exam? Things of that nature. And so if you look at this, the readiness kind of affects the challenge that you can have and the support. And so back to that calculus example, a student who's not ready at all for the class, it doesn't matter how much support they have, the challenge will outweigh the support and the student won't be very successful. We'll look at a couple other scenarios in a minute, but that's kind of the basis of his theory. So in the journal coming up, I want you to kind of think about those three conditions. So the amount of challenge a student can tolerate is a function of the amount of support available. This was really the basis for Sanford's theory. And so we can kind of look at it as a balance between the two. And so we can think of a scenario, let's say, where the support totally outweighs the challenge, right? So if we look on here that the support is heavier, it's weighing down the challenge, which is very high on the other side. And so let's think about maybe a student who's living in the residence halls, but their mom and dad, call them every day to wake them up and remind them to go to class, right? So there's that challenge. Or a student who goes home and has their laundry done every weekend for them, right? So there's no challenge of figuring out how to do your laundry. There's no challenge of managing that. So in this scenario, or if you think about our academic situation with calculus, let's say a student has taken calculus previously and gotten an A. Maybe they took the AB Calc and scored a 5 on the test, and so they're not challenged by that class. and they go to tutoring, right? And they get help. So sure, they might get an A in the class. Sure, the student's laundry might be done. But there's no personal growth. There's no development. And so that's really the key to Sanford's theory is if you balance out the challenge and support, that's where growth and development happens. And we've talked a lot in this class about character development, about personal growth, about character and really growing that way. And so that's what this is about. So if we look at a different scenario where now, the challenge outweighs the support. And so something, is really hard. So let's say somebody's trying to work 20 hours a week and take 16 credit hours. Or maybe they're working even more than that. That creates a tremendous challenge. Or think about maybe a single parent who's trying to go back to school, right? Tremendous challenges, maybe not a lot of support. Things like that. Or if we think about that calculus example of somebody who's really not ready to do it. So even if there's all the support in the world, that's going to be tough for them. And so with this, people burn out. They'll get stressed out. They'll either fail or give up. And so there's not a lot of growth, not a lot of development happening in this scenario either. If we look then and we have it balanced, right? So let's say the challenge is equal to the support. And that's pretty good. Sanford said, that'll help somebody grow. It'll help somebody develop. But he said not as much. He discovered throughout his research that optimum growth, optimum development happens when the challenge just slightly outweighs the support, right? So there's a little more challenge than support. And so think about that with kind of your own scenario in how much support do you have at school? What are the challenges for you here on campus? And what's the balance between them? And so that's really what we're looking at with this journal. So hopefully with this info, you can kind of get at this journal and describe your college experience up until this point using those terms of challenge and support and readiness, right? You can throw readiness in there. How's the balance for you? What can you do in order to best achieve the good ideal balance, right? Where it's a little bit more challenging than it is supportive. And so that's why I think it's important to assess yours. Is it heavily supported? Is it heavily challenged? Where does that need to balance out? The other thing I'd like to hear from you about is Sanford's theory is a bit out of date, right? He did it in the 1960s, and as we learned from Del Banco about the kind of people that were going to college in the 60s, that was kind of just right before the civil rights movement. And so he really did most of his research on white men. And so take a look at that, right? What might be some of the challenges for contemporary students that Sanford wouldn't have considered? It doesn't necessarily have to be you. Kind of think outside yourself on this last part. I look forward to reading it. If you have any questions, let me know.